Today is Wednesday, December 21st, 2011. I'm Matthew T.G.
I'm David Drury.
I'm Heath Mulliken.
And I'm Tony Casey. Welcome to the Techology Show, a weekly podcast featuring technology, theology, and everything in between. The world's only user-antagonistic podcast. This is episode 137. Woo-hoo! Hey, I want to welcome to the show today as one of our guests, David Drury. David, good having you today.
Good to be here. Happy Hanukkah to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Started yesterday.
We were going to light the candles here today, but
we're all into ancient practices and all that.
Yes, yeah. We've had David on the show a couple of times to talk about books that he has co-authored, but today he's just joining us as a guest, and at the end of the show we'll let him give us a little update on Soul Shift and the tour that they've had and what's in the future for them. Steve is not with us today. He honestly thought that this was our Wednesday off, but next Wednesday is our Wednesday off, so we do wish our brother Steve a very Merry Christmas.
He'll be just, I think, as a penalty, like he should just do the show himself.
Next Wednesday. I like that idea.
Well, that just means more turtles for me.
All right, Heath, just real quick here, this is kind of random, but so what do we need to, any update in the sports world, anything we need to...
Well, you can get those Orange Bowl tickets for $23 for the upper deck. Clemson has only sold, at the last count, maybe half of their tickets. So when I first found out, man, Clemson's going to BCS Bowl, let's check on tickets. They're $75. I'm like, that's right at that edge of crazy to pay for a sporting event. Although I paid that much for my WrestleMania ticket, so never mind.
Now that's crazy. Now that's crazy because that's not even sports, man. That's theater.
Tony, you're gonna get us banned. And anyway, but now those tickets are down to $20-something, but it's on a Wednesday. And you got to drive 14 hours to get there, and
university has to buy whatever doesn't sell. So it's crazy.
Yeah, the bowl system's great. Love the BCS.
All right. Hey, as we start out today, we have a book giveaway, Dr. Joanne Lyons' book, The Ultimate Blessing, and we've been working with Joanne's secretary on this. She said that they will send that out directly. It probably will not happen till after the holiday season, but if you would like to, if you're in the chat room today, we're going to throw you in for the drawing of that book again.
Just automatically? How about it? No, don't if you're in the chat room, we'll get you in. Okay, so
you're in.
I'll have a link for everybody to check their entry status just to be sure that I've got you. But just get in the chat room. You can do that by logging in using your Ustream credentials, either on our site at thetechnologyshow.com/live or on an IRC client. You can use that as well. See it either way. But we will get you entered for that.
All right. Let's begin the show. Now, this is very Wesleyan specific. We're going to start talking about the restructuring of the Wesleyan Church. There was a recent general board meeting where there is now a recommendation to restructure the denomination. This is really why we have David on today, because he knows all the ins and outs about it. He probably drafted the document as far as we know. So right now, the way the denomination is structured going into this year, we had the quadrennium. We had 3 general superintendents, and then you have these various departments at headquarters. The proposal, as I understand it, and you guys can jump in here and correct me, as I understand the proposal is 1 general superintendent, and I think the official proposal is 4 departments then, and you'd have these department heads.
I heard it was worded 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to bind them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them, I think was the actual wording. No, I'm teasing.
The document has not been drafted yet. That's from Kerry Kend, who...
Okay, well, he would know.
He would know.
He would know. So, what are you guys hearing? What discussions have people had?
Well, I guess this would be part of the discussion. One of the things that's happening on Facebook is there is a forum, a group called Groundswell that's been talking about this, and I think they put up a poll, not a poll. They did a poll, and I think of what needs to change in the Wesleyan Church, or what should the priorities be, and restructuring was, I don't even know if it was in the top 3. David, was it in the top 3? I don't know off the top of my head.
I don't remember the final poll. It's still running, actually, so it adjusts over time.
And it's not a Gallup poll; it's one of those unscientific polls,
Yeah.
whatever that means.
Wesleyans on social media. It's a real broad group.
Yes, yes, yes. But what I'm hearing is that, what I've seen, what I've read is that this is perhaps a good thing. Maybe gets back some to our roots a little bit, but that in the grand scheme of things, while restructuring is good, it's not going to change what happens at 6380 West Oak Highway. Does that make any sense? It does. That's not going to affect what the day-to-day operations and how
Yeah.
my church is reaching people.
Yeah.
And so that's
So that's what you're saying, or that's what you're hearing?
that's what I think I'm hearing. But that also is what I'm saying. I think we do need to restructure. But I think there may be some people out there that are thinking, man, this restructuring is going to change everything. And it's not. It will change some things for the better, for the good.
Yeah.
It'll be great.
Yeah.
But I still got to get up and I still got to reach people. And if I'm not doing that,
Yeah.
the church needs this Holy Spirit of Jesus Christ working in and through it. And if the local church is not doing what it can as far as compassionate ministries and reaching people, it doesn't matter what happens in Fishers, Indiana.
Well, and I think that what you're saying there is important. It's probably true of anything we discuss that feels fairly removed. I guess, one thing just to clarify, I'm not involved in any way. I'm not on the GBA shoot. I'm not even on my DBA anymore in the district. I think I took them all off, so they voted me off. So I'm not involved in that way. But I do talk to all the people. I live close here to Indianapolis and know several GBA members and try to be a listening ear. But what I think is important to note is this is a real long journey. As with most denominational things, it takes a long time for change to happen. And 12 years ago, there was actually a strategic planning that happened for the denomination. That's where they came out with some new mission statement and a lot of the focus that we have, a lot of language came out of that. And then there was also a real recommendation to restructure to better achieve that mission.
Yeah.
Well, that never happened at that time. And then also, there was a real drift over the last decade of saying, boy, have we been as mission effective as we want to be as a denomination? And pretty unanimously, the GBA and many leaders in the church have said, no, we're not as effective as we need to be, not just to, it's one thing to advance, but we're actually receding a bit.
Yes.
And so that's a problem. And so that's where they really engaged that listening tour, where they went around, I think there was more than 200 events, where they listened and heard the pastors and key leaders and lay leaders in the denomination and heard from them. The GBA was actually, and the General Conference was actually fairly opposed to the idea of restructuring. Even at General Conference 2004, for instance, there was something that came up from my district. I spoke in favor of it from West Michigan, my old district.
Yeah.
To go to 1GS, and that was actually voted down. The General Board didn't want that at that time. So it's not really something the General Board advocated. Over time, it was really something that the grassroots said, okay, we need a different structure to achieve our mission a little bit more effectively. So you're right, Heath. I think that we all need to be more effective in our local level. You might say, oh, is this just reshuffling chairs? Well, part of it's saying let's have a structure that is more effective at
Right.
achieving overall. Otherwise, why have a denomination at all? I could do my church on my own. I don't need the denomination.
Right.
The things I should need it for, let's do those better.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think is important in this whole discussion that you've already hit on, David, and that is that this does seem to be more grassroots, a groundswell of what people want at the local church. And I think, now, you guys shoot me down here if you think I'm wrong, I think part of what drives this is that when you have churches that are becoming so big, into the thousands, it does get to this issue of what do they need the denomination? And what's happening is they are resourcing themselves, and we have in a positive way. I don't mean that negatively. We're in the region where 12 Stone is, and 12 Stone's 2 hours away from us. But I have great admiration for that church, and what we're seeing is not only are they resourcing themselves, but they are resourcing other local churches, other Wesleyan churches, even to some extent the districts. And so here in South Carolina, in a very small way, we've been the recipient of some of their resourcing and will continue to be so. And so here again, that's not something that's coming from up here at the general headquarters down, but here you have a local church and it's reaching out. And so part of this is the changing face of the denomination at the local church level, as I see it.
To me, it's a question of initiative. I think as long as the local church and local church leaders and pastors, if we are continually waiting for a word from headquarters, if we're continually waiting for resources from headquarters, if we're waiting for the okay from headquarters to reach our community, then we're kind of just going to be sitting around waiting. I love it when local churches, there's a guy named Jeremy Mavis who's on the children's ministry team for the denomination. His church wrote their own children's ministry curriculum. It's free. It's on their website. And that was a case of a church not waiting to see, well, let's see what headquarters comes out with. They took initiative and said, let's do our own. And that's what the local church needs to do. The ideas need to float up instead of floating down. Does that make any sense?
Well, how much of this, now I'm curious, how much of this is the changing society? Because we can go on several issues here. You can self-publish a book now through Amazon. I think through Google you could be the creator of your own music and promote your own music.
You have publishing tools and capabilities in your hands. Every one of us does right now. We're using them to do this show that, you go back even 10 years ago, but I mean, you talk about like when my parents were my age, you'd have to go to a place to do this. I mean, remember my mom talking about publishing some of the stuff that came out of the district youth department and how it was basically a cut and paste thing. And you'd have to piece it all together. Yeah, seriously. Getting the little clip arts cut out and put right where you want them, get it all lined up. And you had to have access to those tools and equipment. Now we've all got it in our own hands.
Well, and I think what's happened, I think you're totally right, Tony, that over time, it's kind of the long tail effect. That there's been so many things now that are available, you can get all kinds of things even for free.
Yep.
But part of what we might add to that is there's a lot of junk because of that. I mean, the internet quality meter is pretty low. And so, yeah, we have a lot of stuff that's free and available. But what's happened, much like with the long tail, the stuff that is hierarchical or that costs money or that's above us in leadership, we expect a higher level of quality from that. Because we're like, well, gee, if it's only as good as the free thing I got, why do I even need that? I don't. And so I think it has affected the way we look at our leadership. And over the years, maybe we become more demanding of our leadership. And some of that's unfair, but some of that's just a reality. I think that a lot of people on the local level just expect more from above them. And so, I don't envy those people. I certainly wouldn't want to work down there. But they do seem to have more pressure now than they used to be. Even like I think the people at headquarters, I think they have more pressure from the GBA.
Yeah.
You got to remember, all the people that have jobs down in Indianapolis, all their jobs are on the line right now.
Sure.
It's really the GBA that really is saying, hey, let's restructure this. And what I like is most of the people, however, whose jobs are on the line, I hear them talking in support of all this and saying, this is better for the denomination. So I understand people might be opposed to restructure. I've been in favor of something like this all the way since the early 2000s. So I speak very in favor of it. But if somebody wants to be opposed to it, that's great. But what I don't want people to do is question people's motivations and make it sound like they're power grabbing.
Yeah.
Because, man, in fact, they're losing power in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Anyway.
you say, that the expectations are greater. I think that's true, but I think there's a double-edged sword here. You have that side of it where people's expectations of leadership are greater. The other side of it is because we can resource ourselves, because we can do so much for ourselves, then there is also an attitude sometimes that, well, I don't need a structure over me.
Yeah.
I can do this. This is why I have such admiration for what's going on at 12 Stone. As a matter of fact, at a conference this past fall, the question was asked, why do you stay Wesleyan? And Kevin Myers was the one who was fielding the question. And the person who asked the question pointed out, you don't need a denominational structure. And he articulated why they were still Wesleyan. And he did that, he did it in a way that helped you understand that, while there were things that he could be critical of, his major point was this, that it was the Wesleyan Church that gave me an opportunity. It was this structure that presented for me a ministry position, and it is through this structure that I was prepared for ministry. And so while I support this idea of streamlining, and part of this is to get for the local church to be effective in what it's doing, because that's where the battleground is. At the same time, I think that when that structure is good, I think that it is a creation. We see it in creation. I think structure is God ordained. And all we're doing is tweaking that structure so that we can be more effective at the local church level. That's the way I see it. All right.
I think that part of what would be, I don't think that our larger churches need the denomination. Not a lot of our churches, even our smaller churches, on a very day-to-day level. But overall, we're a part of something bigger. Actually, way back when I was in grad school in Boston, I did a study of larger Wesleyan churches and studying whether or not they felt like the Willow Creek Association, which was fairly new in its influence at the time, or the denomination was more important. And on almost everything for those larger Wesleyan churches, Willow Creek was actually far more influential. But there were two areas that the denomination remained crucial. And each of them, even people like Wes Dupin, who I had prior to that perceived as fairly non-denominational, up at Daybreak. Even Wes, in fact, he might have spoke strongest toward it as saying that financial integrity and theological accountability are key parts of what a denomination provides that you cannot get as an independent church.
Yeah.
You cannot get from Willow Creek or from Rick Warren or other associations. And we might say, well, theology and money, that's just sort of making sure you don't go wrong. Well, if you go wrong on money, you go to jail.
Yeah.
And if you go wrong on theology, you started a cult. So in my mind, those are pretty important things for us to still give. And they're also things, as 12 Stone could point out, they actually infuse you with some energy. And we need to get back to that to say, wait, how can we financially infuse energy into innovation? The Hope and Orleans Trust is trying to do some of that and infuse it theologically as well, which I think we've completely forgotten how important it is for us to not just say, hey, let's tone down our holiness language, and instead to say, boy, how can we re-language that to include a lot of things we care about?
Very good. Yeah. All right, let's plow forward here. Next story we have on the docket has to do with intergenerational ministry. There's a Christianity Today article entitled, "Should Sunday School Be for the Whole Family? Church youth need more exposure to adults." This goes back to a story that we covered in September, where you have a gentleman by the last name of Brown who came out with a report and basically said that what you have in youth ministry over the last 50 years is a failed experiment. It was controversial. It still continues to be controversial, but there is a lot of traction being gained here in the church and different blogs and things that we're seeing, the importance of intergenerational ministry. And just as a side story here, we're going to link our listeners to a recent Barna Group study where they say that I think it's 40 or 50% of those, let's see here, I'm pulling it up right now, when they turn 15, these are youth in the church. Let me see. Research reported by the Barna Group found that nearly 2/3 of Christians leave the church either permanently or for an extended period of time after age 15. And so from this 15 to 18 year range, this is where many young people are disconnecting from the church. So, I mean, what do we think about this? And especially, more specifically, the whole intergenerational aspects of what we're beginning to see and how that's being thrown out and recommended within the church.
We're too busy in the chat room. The discussion is still going on. Hot and strong there, Tony.
I think that this is just a key question, and it's one we're grappling with at College Church. We've had, I mean, when I hear that quote that youth ministry over the last 50 years has been a failed experiment, first of all, that sounds like a great publicist quote to sell a book, but I disagree with it. And I think that it's important for us to not, I think that youth ministry has had so many good things it's infused, and of course the stats might show us not a failure of youth ministry, but perhaps a failure of the rest of church life to capture and keep those kids. So most of the statistics, I mean, they're not saying kids show up to youth group and then they leave the church. They're saying once they're out of the youth ministry, they leave the church. So maybe it's not us. It's more reconnecting. So I know we actually just did a retreat at our staff a month ago, and we read 3 different books on intergenerational ministry. The Fuller Institute has some great stuff on this that we've learned from. Our youth pastor's leading this charge, Matt Beck, to say, how do we become more intergenerational? And probably the best resource I could recommend is written by a Wesleyan, and it gives us some good perspective, and that's Matthew Deprez.
Yep.
Book called Why We're Unashamedly Intergenerational, which is actually a free download from his website, MatthewDeprez.com. And I don't get any kickbacks from that. It's just a good book. And he's learned a lot from the other people, and because it's free, it's probably a good first place to go to learn about it. For me, we're really asking, man, how do we as a church do this? Because we, for a long time, had a silo youth ministry, and we don't want that to be the case.
Yeah, I think this has been the big thing. Now, we've had Deprez on here before, and as a matter of fact, Heath, you mentioned something this morning. You just were talking with Matthew, and
we're hoping to have him back on in January sometime. So he's at the forefront of this in our denomination. I was listening to some of the things you were saying, David, and this is something, I look back over the last decade and a half that I was in youth ministry, and for the most part, denomination-wide camps were growing. Our conventions stayed at a consistent size, but yet the number of kids going to Wesleyan schools and the number of kids remaining Wesleyan or even staying in the church was shrinking. And I've always just kind of been struck by that is, youth ministry grew during the last decade and a half, but college ministry shrunk and young adult ministry shrunk. And I do think I told one of my teens a few weeks ago, if I could go back and start all over, I probably would have done it completely different as far as being more family integrated and not so focused on the Wednesday night youth meeting and my little devotional and stuff like that, but making it more of a family ministry.
One of the things that I'm reminded of, we had Melinda Denton on the show. She's been part of this huge study, the largest study ever done in America, as far as we know, on the religious life of American teenagers. And her research is also showing the importance of intergenerational. But she said, by that, we're not saying that youth ministries need to go by the wayside and that you don't segregate the groups at times. Her point is that you find ways for the generations to interact, and so these are some of the things that she thinks that the church needs to look at. And even Brown, as I understand it, he's kind of toned down this thing of a 50-year failed experiment. He said, I'm not saying that it's a weed that needs to be pulled, but a plant that needs to be pruned. Well, I think that makes sense. You need to do the research. You need to see what you've learned from that, and then adjust accordingly. All right, let's plow on here to
Chat room.
Chat room.
It's amazing
today.
Yeah, I know.
It's good. It's
I'm
good
loving
stuff
our
today.
discussion. We got it going on in the chat room.
Okay,
today.
well, if you all want to help
So
me
you
out,
it's all right. You just got to carry the show, Tony. Go for it, man.
Thanks. Well, do you need me here?
Yes.
Yeah.
You just carry that train where you're going. We'll catch up with you.
Okay, time.
And the discussion in the chat room it really stayed on that first topic of, and what really combined the two is, our denomination. What are the reasons we're losing young leaders, and what changes can we make to reverse that trend? and it's people are passionate about things like
Yeah,
that.
well, let's not get so narrow because this is not a Wesleyan
Well,
problem.
no, absolutely, absolutely.
This is an evangelical problem, or this is a Christianity a problem within Christianity today, and the culture in which we live. And you've already put your finger on it. We're not losing youth in
Right.
church. We're losing them once they go to college.
Yeah, and maybe, oh my goodness, I'm about to put myself on the interrogation stand, but maybe the signs of growth the last decade and a half, maybe you think about it, what were we doing? Well, we were providing a fun, entertaining Wednesday night activity, many youth rooms filled with the latest video games and gadgets and video clips and movie nights, and who wouldn't want to come to that? Then that's what we wanted. We wanted to where all the kids come. But did we make disciples?
Was there substance to that?
Right.
No,
and I think there was some.
The research is showing that it's crucial that a teen has actual relationships with
Yeah.
people that are 15 years older than them that are not their parents.
Right.
Now, I should prequel that with nothing is more important than the parents. And I think we probably could criticize parenting far deeper than youth ministry.
Right.
And that's probably required. I know in our church we do.
And
But there are. How do we get it so that kids have a relationship with people that are 15 years older than them? And I would add to that. How do we get it so that our middle-aged people and our older people know the name of teenagers
right.
than their grandkids, or even their grandkids?
I think
And so we're trying to foster a relationship. One of the things we're doing is on Wednesday night when we do have a big youth ministry thing.
Right.
We now have a meal before it.
man, yes.
In our after-school program, kids who have no family in our church, right off the street, they also eat with us. And so then you've got like a 15-year-old kid with reading problems who's sitting down with Alice Wills in our church and having a laugh and connecting, and she's 90. And building that relationship of trust and saying, boy, I actually know somebody who's an adult who I respect and admire, and yeah, she's a little quirky, but she's a Christian, and that's cool. And I think that those kind of things, all the research showing us that, and we at our church at least are trying to figure out how to do that a little more authentically.
David, I don't know if you're aware of the research of Christian Smith and Melinda Denton, but on the first wave of their research, they in the evangelical movement, we really touted this message for a couple decades that the number one influence on youth were their peers. Well, their research showed far and away it was parents. Far and away. There wasn't a close second. So, what you say about parenting, I think, is a good word.
Yeah, but I think we should add to that because of that, a lot of these kids we're ministering to in a lot of churches that have a thriving youth ministry, their parents are horrible influences in their lives.
Right.
So
right.
we don't want to become an intergenerational church that's ingrown and forget those kids who need a surrogate parental influence. Yeah, it's a harder job, but we want to be Kids Hope mentors and after-school program mentors and project leadership mentors for those kids, and not just say, well, sucks to be you.
Well,
yeah, awesome. Yeah, good word.
One of the things that's got to happen in youth ministry is, we've kind of been seeker-driven in our Sunday morning services. That's been the catchphrase for the last 20 years. But you would never, the object of what we're trying to do isn't just to simply get people there on Sunday morning. We're doing everything we can. We want it to be attractional. We want people to be there on Sunday morning. But that's not the end-all, be-all. I think for a while that did become the end-all, be-all with youth ministry, is we just wanted kids to be there. Man, just come, and it'll rub off on you. I think what your church is doing, David, is remarkable. I think, and having worked at a college church, most of my youth sponsors were college students. If I could go back, I would recruit people in their 40s, people in their 50s. I would have a more intergenerational youth ministry team and not rely solely on those college students. I think it's again, this is something we've got to be very intentional about. It's something that, for me as a pastor, I've got to make that importance known to everybody in our church. That it's a Sunday morning message that everybody in our church, we have to invest in the lives of our children. We have to invest in the lives of our youth. Maybe you don't Maybe you don't like kids, but you can take a kid to McDonald's and you can hang out with them. A kid that comes from a single parent home. You know,
I
you
like
can.
that. You might not like kids, but you like cheeseburgers.
Yes, yes.
Hey, I want to push back on you a little bit. You know, you said it used to be that the be all end all was how many did we gather.
Right.
This is one of my contentions. It still is.
Yes.
So while we say discipleship is important, while we say that spiritual formation in the life of the pastor is important,
Right.
when I get to conference,
Yeah.
you want to know two things.
Yeah.
How many did I have, and did I pay my budget?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that those things are unimportant. What I'm saying is the dashboard indicators aren't right.
Right.
And
you're right.
and spiritual formation is a very hard thing to measure, and I get that. Which dovetails right into your guys' book, David, Soul Shift, because
Yes.
I see that book as spiritual formation. How can we wrap our arms around spiritual formation and get some benchmarks that we're striving for? But
Right.
I still think that the gathering of people is the be-all, end-all.
Right. I love what I believe it was Dr. Lyon at the gathering this year. And she said, we want to start measuring new starts. We want to start measuring new things. And some of these things are things you can't measure. I mean, how do you measure the number of people being mentored
Right.
one-on-one
I get
in
it.
your church?
I understand.
I know, but I totally agree with you. I mean, sooner or later, we may have to remove Wesleyan from our name. Because you think about the very essence of who John Wesley was. It was about the small group. It was about accountability. It was about structure.
Oh, you mean remove it because we're not doing some of those things?
When
that
you
he
get
did?
down to the root of who Wesley was, if John Wesley, he's like, what are you guys measuring? How many small groups you got? How are people being discipled? We had 100 in worship Sunday. He's like, I mean, who knows what he would say? I mean, I'm just saying. For me, that's what I want to get back to.
It's a different animal for Wesley because he's not. I mean, this is a parachurch organization that he's starting. I mean, really,
Right.
it wasn't the church, but nonetheless, I mean, I still agree with your point that it was through small groups and
Right.
it was through accountability.
Yeah.
That this movement.
You
Well,
know,
the key there is it was a renewal movement within people who were already in Christendom. And so it's not an entirely different situation. I mean, we as pastors and leaders in the church, even lay leaders, our task is now to convert Christians in many ways.
Oh boy.
So, I bet Wesley saw it the same way. And when you read his writings, it sounds that way. And that's part of why we sometimes criticize and say, oh, well, they were just trying to get people sanctified, and they were saying, oh, you're not a Christian because you aren't sanctified. Well, really what they were saying was, most of the church is not Christian. And I think the same thing is somewhat true today in American Christendom.
Yeah.
and
good point.
isn't every book that's coming out now saying that? I mean, you got Radical Together, you got Not a Fan. There's so many books coming out. I mean, Hole in the Gospel. So many books pointing out that really Western Christianity in a lot of ways has got it wrong. And so one of the things I love, and this is shameless plug, one of the things I love about Soul Shift is it makes holiness not a checkbox to-do list. It's about things I can look in the mirror and really see, am I changing? And when we cast the vision for our church merge, I mean, Soul Shift it's in the vision document of this is what we're measuring. Me to you,
get
sheep to
bonus
shepherd.
points.
And
What was that?
You get bonus points.
and so, that's what I just loved it. And, I mean, our whole church is going to go through that.
Well, and we were talking earlier about measuring the wrong things.
Yeah.
And that's so easy to do, but some of it is we've never given an alternative. So yeah, it's
Right.
easy for us to count the 3 B's: buildings, budgets, and butts in the seats, because that's very tangible
3 B's.
to count. But nobody's ever given another option. So we did try to do that with Soul Shift, to give another option. By the way, a cool thing that we're developing now, it's just in alpha stage, but is an actual app for your phone. I actually just tested it out the last 3 days, where it actually asks you questions about certain soul shifts throughout the day, sort of like you got a text from God. You have to reply and dial
Nice.
it in and say how much it is. It's just in alpha development. Our church is going to test it out in January and February in beta development. and then hopefully it'll get to the place where a lot of people can use it. Dr. Tim Steenberg, who's a researcher, is doing all that with a bunch of computer geniuses, and we're geeked about that.
Hey, just
So,
know
yeah,
we're always up for
something
alpha and beta testing here at this table. Just so you know, anything, any resources or things, we'll happily take a look at them for you.
I'm beta testing this tie I got at Goodwill.
Listen, it looks like an alpha to me. That's all I'm saying. All right, hey, let's. We're a little behind here, so let's plow forward. Time Magazine's Person of the Year, The Protester.
I protest.
Yeah, last Wednesday when we were setting up the studio, we had the Today Show on, and they made the announcement, and they give examples of what they meant by the protester. And in with this, you had people who were protesting for,
In like Libya and Egypt, and people who are like dying for what they're doing. All right.
yeah, and then the protest that we've had on Wall Street. And so the conversation that Matthew and I got into was, are these of the same nature? Are they of the same quality? And I don't know.
I don't think so, and I also believe that as Protestants, we have lost the appreciation for a good protest. I think so, but I think that these things.
What does that mean?
I don't even know, but
I'm gonna come occupy your house.
Sounds good.
I think.
Occupy headquarters. See, now this is how they.
Oh my goodness gracious!
Let's not be the ones that start that, please. Please.
No.
Please, Tony, you just Pandora's box was just ripped wide open.
But I think what you saw happening overseas. Now, we're not going to know the real outcome of what happened in Egypt and other countries. We're really not going to know the outcome of that for years, because what we first saw was like, oh yeah, man, they're uprising, that's great, man, and they're oppressed, and then the people who have come into power were like, oh.
The question is always this: what are you going to replace that regime with?
Right.
And if and a lot of times in totalitarian governments, what happens is you replace one dictator with another dictator.
Yes.
I'm not saying that's what's going to happen in these countries, not at all. But yeah, I mean that's the question. With what has it been replaced? We agree on some of these ideals, but what is going to come now and fill the vacuum? And that's always a scary situation.
I heard a great quote from Max Lucado. He was talking about his book Outlive Your Life, and he was talking about the end of time when Christ is crowned king, and that for the first time, really, creation will get what it desperately needs, and that's one king ruling over one kingdom. And to me, that's I think there are some people in the church that look at all this and...
Are you going to give a prediction today, like a date?
Well, Tony, don't spoil it for the people. We want them to stay to the end of the show. But I feel like, so many of us, we see these things going on. We see the Occupy movement. We're like, man, whoa, just can't wait for things to calm down. And this is it. I mean, this is the world we live in now. We are going to be in a constant state of protest and a constant state of these movements.
Now, if you're a post-millennialist, you wouldn't say that. You would say that at some point here, revival is going to take hold and things are going to get better. And
I
better.
hope so. I hope revival takes hold. I hope the Holy Spirit moves in a way never before seen in human history.
How relevant?
At least before March the 3rd.
Yeah. Yeah. There's your date.
Yeah.
How relevant is Time Magazine's Person of the Year?
I don't know. I mean, like, you can't deny that in 2011 that what they did is right, and I do applaud them that their cover isn't an Occupy Wall Street protester.
Yeah,
it is an
true.
actual protester who I think deserves some recognition over the past year. So I think it's relevant. I just when they lump them together as equal, that's where we run into the hairiness here.
I have two thoughts on this. One is I thought it was a good choice because what we have is a little bit of a void of leadership in America and abroad. And because of that void of leadership, I think choosing these protesters might be a good thing. But then on top of that, I think we need to pay attention to it as leaders in the church, because with the Tea Party movement, the Occupy movement in America, there's a bit of a swell at the ground roots, regardless of their political motivations, of discontent.
Yes.
And I think we as pastors and leaders in the church probably feel that in the church, whatever church we're in, that leadership has gotten more flat, that our leadership style has to be more open, and that if we don't tap into a bit of that, they might occupy the parsonage, right?
Yeah.
I think that's important for us to pay attention.
Occupy it. Yeah.
To me, and another big difference between all these protests and movements that have happened this year is that for the people in Egypt, the mere fact that they were protesting was against the law. The mere fact that they were even wanting change, that was against the law. Whereas in America, what was against the law was camping in a park that you weren't supposed to, and the things in the law that they were breaking were breaking windows and being violent just for the sake of violence, especially the ports in, I believe, San Francisco.
Yeah.
Just some silly stuff, stupid stuff going on.
Whereas, and that's the stuff that Matthew and I discussed. We're not sure it was equal, but
Right.
David, you make a great point here that this whole idea of kind of a discontent with status quo leadership. Real quick here, we have a book giveaway. Just want to remind you of that. We're giving away Dr. Joanne Lyons' book, The Ultimate Blessing. If you're in the chat room today, you are automatically entered. You want to add anything to that?
I've got a link that I keep throwing in the chat room where you can double check, be sure that your name's on there. But growing a very good list of entries. This is one of our biggest chat room days we've ever had. I mean, the chat room is just awesome today. So you guys are fantastic. It adds a whole new dynamic to the show. We love and appreciate you. So for Christmas, that's why we're giving away.
Yeah, it's a great dynamic. At times, I feel like I'm flying all alone.
It's because you are, because you're not in the chat room.
All right, let's plow forward to They Said It.
Read my lips.
I'm going to say this again.
I've never taken steroids or HGH.
I took the initiative in creating the internet.
The Macintosh, of all the machines I've ever seen, is the only one that meets that standard.
I'm not a crook.
If you know what you're doing here, slide out.
All party members, military men, and the public should faithfully follow the leadership of Comrade Kim Jong-un and protect and further strengthen the unified front of the party, military, and the public. KCNA, state news agency's directive to the North Korean people after the death of Kim Jong-il. Source, BBC.
As with all of our products, we continue to make them better for customers with regular software updates. In fact, in less than 2 weeks, we're rolling out an over-the-air update to Kindle Fire that will improve performance, touch navigation, and give customers the option to choose what items display on the carousel. This was Amazon Public Relations talking about updates that are coming to Kindle Fire, which is currently selling at the rate of 1 million units a week. The source was Mashable.
Facebook is making us unhappy by making everyone else look really, really happy. It is bringing down a lot of people's daily sense of well-being. Harvard Business Review blogger Daniel Galati declaring that Facebook is making people miserable. Source, CBS Philly.
Once the world leader in smartphones, RIM has had a difficult time transitioning, not just to the emerging tablet space, but to the app-centric nature of the mobile market. Additionally, RIM is being challenged by Apple, Google, and Microsoft in the enterprise space, where the BlackBerry used to be ubiquitous. Christina Warren reporting on the current condition of research in motion, the makers of BlackBerry. Source, Mashable. All right, so have you guys seen any of the video coming out of North Korea, the mourners?
No, I haven't.
Yes.
I haven't seen the
Yes.
mourners, but I'm super interested to see what's going to be happening over the next little
I
bit
saw
there.
the mourners, and I think it was CNN. They were showing video of the mourners and tweets about it, and people were tweeting, I've seen better acting from Paris Hilton. Because people were just going...
It was over the board. I mean, it was over the top.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
His son, they don't even know how old he is exactly, but what I've read, 28 or 29 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He loves Michael Jordan and has drawn lots of pictures. He likes to draw, Yes, yeah, he's a big Jordan fan, so maybe he'll tap the NBA for some.
There's
many
so much
Nikes
stuff
made?
to poke fun at in this, but it's heartbreaking to me. I mean, I just got to be just gut level honest. The whole thing is just absolutely terrifying. Not in that I'm worried that the world's going to end or anything like that. I mean, because what happens in that regards will happen, and the Lord's got that under control. But for the people who are so messed up, I mean, from birth, just indoctrinated with no other freedom, no other choice, even the son. All right. So, I mean, for the past 3 years, he's been in big time training because this day was coming, and I mean, what does it mean? He's a puppet. Is my understanding. It sounds as if it's actually this guy's uncle.
Yeah.
It's like Kim Jong-il's brother-in-law, who's going to be really the puppeteer behind the scenes of things, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that Matthew did a year or so ago is actually played at our church the BBC documentary on North Korea. It was an eye opener to me. And in the midst of this, we found a video. Now it's a 9-minute video. There's no way we could show the full 9 minutes. But what I did is I just cut a couple minutes out of this little video clip, and it was at the last Lausanne conference on world missions, and it is a North Korean young lady whose father was a Christian in North Korea. He went to China because of persecution. China had him go back to North Korea. He finally served his prison time, and instead of going back to China for asylum, he decided to stay in North Korea and to preach the gospel, and was eventually, she said, we don't know what happened to our father, but eventually, they believe he was killed. And so we have just 2 minutes of her speaking here to give you a sense of what it's like for Christians in North Korea.
He was reported and arrested by the Chinese police and was sent back to North Korea, where he was sentenced to prison. He was forced to leave me behind, but the 3 years he served in prison only made my father's faith stronger. He cried out to God more desperately rather than to complain or blame him. When he was released from prison, he returned to China. We were reunited briefly. It was then that he started to gather Bibles. Not long after, he decided to return to North Korea to share Christ's message of life and hope among the hopeless people of his homeland. He chose not to go to South Korea, where he could have enjoyed religious freedom. Instead, he chose to return to North Korea to share the love of God in a dangerous land. It breaks my heart to tell you that in 2006, his work was discovered by the North Korean government, and he was again imprisoned. I have heard no word from my father nor about him ever since. In all probability, he has been shot to death in public on charges of treason and espionage, as is so often the case for persecuted Christians in North Korea.
This is a 9-minute video. You can find it on YouTube. I would highly recommend that you download this, use it for a Sunday school class if your time allows in a worship service. She goes on to explain how the Lord is calling her to go back to North Korea.
Yeah.
So when she leaves the Lausanne conference, what she's planning to do is go back to North Korea to spread the gospel, and just a courageous young lady and well worth your time.
I did that in church. We used this. We used that documentary. Like I say, I would highly recommend it because everything is just a sham. Basically, it's of these reporters that get invited in, and everything is put on in this big production for them. But they intentionally have cameras hidden where they can actually show what's going on. And it breaks your heart, and it stirs something inside of you. I mean, I am serious right now. If there was any way that I could be a part of the effort in getting people out or in doing something like that, it's the kind of thing to just make you jump at the chance. And I mean, my prayer is that in this death, that I know that a transition from where North Korea is now to where we would like it to be, or where I'd like to see it, would probably mean the death of a lot more people. But my hope is that somehow this can be the thing that gets the ball rolling to make that happen, and hopefully the legs will come out from underneath the stupidity that's behind it. I mean, if one thing that I was talking about in church, like for the radio, they try to get, South Korea will try to broadcast radio into North Korea. There's a lot of stuff set up to jam all of that to where people can't listen to it. But I mean, if you're caught doing that, you go to a prison. Your family, your mother and father go to prison, and any of your children go to prison. So it's like this generational thing where if you're charged against the government, both the generation before and after you are also drawn into that and taken away, and basically just end up disappearing, which means dying for it all. And just it absolutely crazy. It's worth looking into. It's worth reading up about. It's worth educating yourself on if you haven't already.
All right, let me do an abrupt change here. We do like to talk about technology on this show, and I think that we correctly predicted a year ago that BlackBerry would be the company that really gets, hammered, and it's exactly what has happened to them.
Because earlier this year, when the iPhone was announced for Verizon, Tony, you and I both switched this year from BlackBerry Storms. We thought it was called the Storm because it was going to send shock waves and thunder through the smartphone industry. And no, it just caused a storm of depression and anger every time you tried to use it, especially when you went to the BlackBerry App Store that had 3 apps. 2 of them worked. The other one never worked. And the 2 that did work wouldn't work because your phone was always
locked up.
They had
more than 3. There were 5 at least.
5, yes.
I thought it was interesting. When I sent the show notes to David rewrote that they said it, and I thought made a great application about where the church is in the present day culture. David, would you read that for us?
Yeah, this is basically the exact quote. I just changed the nouns. Once the world leader in religion, Western Christianity has a difficult time transitioning, not just to the emerging church internally, but to the consumer-centric nature of religious pluralism in the West. Additionally, Western Christianity is being challenged by governmental restrictions, internal hypocrisy, secularism, technology, and other religions in the West, where Christianity used to be ubiquitous. And so what I would say is Christianity is to the West what the BlackBerry is to smartphones.
Yeah, gee, man. Yeah, when I read that, that was so good. And
I hear that's going to be a They Said It on our next show. That quote.
Yeah. I think it became a They Said It on this show. Yeah, it was just
it's a North Korean television to read it.
Yeah. Right. Listen, so is everyone feeling miserable because of Facebook? I mean, is this true? People feel like their lives are trashy now?
You know what? I'm the exact opposite because I tend to get on Facebook and feel pretty good about my life. I mean, I don't know. I can see where he is definitely saying that.
Yeah, I can see where he's definitely saying it too because I see it in print. Yeah, there's no doubt he said it. Yeah, can't deny that.
But
so, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is he saying that when you see other people being happy on Facebook, that somehow diminishes your happiness? And if so, how self-centered is that?
Yeah. Wow. And what about, where we're called to be a body, and when one part rejoices, all parts rejoice.
So I don't know if Harvard is that.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, and another dimension to this, David, is what he's saying is that what we put on Facebook really isn't the true expression of who we are. We just put happy stuff that is just a sliver of our life, but people don't know that we actually have tough times and things of this nature.
Facebook doesn't have 500 million members. It has 500 million publicists.
Right. Since we're on Facebook and we're kind of talking about this, one thing that I've kind of seen happen is Facebook breakups, especially people that you're friends with in life, but also on Facebook, and they get divorced. I've had people call me and say, "Hey, how is so and so doing?" I'm like, well, what do you mean? We're on their Facebook page. They took down all their pictures of their wife and their kids, and they don't have a relationship status anymore. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with that. And that's it's kind of weird because you've got somebody who every picture they posted every 15 minutes for the last 3 years was a picture of them and their spouse somewhere doing something, and then all of a sudden they're all gone. And it's just kind of weird
what leads up to that. That's
right. It's just weird that we live our lives publicly now. I mean, we live our lives online,
but it's a testament that there still is so much private in us that needs to be not. I mean, so like this Facebook and being public is good, but we put on this public front, and there still is the private part of us that nobody sees, that nobody knows, because we don't have the right accountability.
Yeah, but
hey, what if John Wesley was here?
I don't know if I want to know all the private stuff.
Not everybody. I'm not saying that everybody needs to know that, but it's like, okay, yeah, I'm public with my life. I'm on Facebook. Have you seen all the pictures I put up? But there's still a part of you that's not. And who is a part of that group that's there? That's your accountability. That's that.
I guess from my selfish point of view is it would be nice if there was just a post that's saying, hey, pray for me. No details, but my wife and I are...
Let's occupy Facebook.
Occupy Facebook. Hey, if people would quit occupying...
That's it. I'm just setting out on Facebook all day today.
That's the problem. People are occupying Facebook. And I would say to them, much like William Shatner said to the people at the Star Trek convention on the Saturday Night Live skit, folks, get a life. Go outside, smell the roses, hear the birds, go do something.
I don't know. I take this whole story with a grain of salt. I don't know.
I'm just so miserable right now.
Yeah. Well, regardless, I do love Heath's point on it. Now, Kindle Fire, real quick, because Jeremy Gertis just let us know that update is actually available today. You can do an update, an over-the-air update. So, Tony, you might need to know this information.
Yes, I might. Here's the thing Amazon never releases their numbers on sales, but they have released their numbers on the sales of the Kindle Fire, and I think it's because it has far exceeded what they thought. 1 million.
It's because they're going after. Let's see where. Oh, you can't.
What are you doing there?
It's too bright. Trying to get the little Apple logo in the sign. They are coming after the. There we go.
The iPad. No,
there we go. That's why they're releasing the numbers. Yeah. They're saying, look at this adoption rate. Apple and iPad have blah blah blah.
It's not adoption rate. I know 3 people that are getting Kindles for Christmas this year, and all 3 of these people would have never got an iPad.
But that's why they're releasing this. They're saying developers, hey, Android, Kindle, come get over here. Let's jump on board with this thing. We got a huge platform. We've got. How many did you say? 1 million a week?
Right now,
we've got 1 million people.
1 million
new people every week for you to sell stuff to. Check this out. That's why they're releasing the numbers.
I agree with that, but they're not. They're not. I don't think they're eating into the iPad base, and maybe they are. I don't know. What do I know about it?
What do you know?
I think so. Especially, and I think it's going to be fun to see Apple's response to this. How soon before they start figuring out, or they offer that $200 price point?
Never.
I disagree.
Okay.
I think one day.
Right, this is good.
I'm not saying soon, but I think one day that they're going to be there at that price point.
David looks like he wants to say something, or am I misreading you here, David?
Yeah, no, I do, and I know it's backing away from the details of it, but I think it's interesting as an observer of. I'm not quite the geek that you guys are on technology. I come here with more theology than technology, I guess. But at least my observation is that that an iPad and a Kindle, as great as they are, and I bought one for my wife last year, an iPad 2, and she loves it. But what I've observed in my home is, and people out, that have them, is it seems as though these new tablet devices, and even the Kindle, which I know is primarily reading before, although it seems to be more and more becoming iPad-esque, it's really a consumption device,
Yeah.
Yes.
not a creation device.
Right.
And I'm a little concerned in the world of technology that, and of course, most of the internet consumption we do is that it is consumption. It is entertainment, not creation. And so I wonder if we're losing the ability. First of all you got to do is read the way people write, to know people are not used to using a keyboard. They're not used to spelling, for instance. And so I wonder if that's a little bit of a concern when kids, get these tablets at, 4th grade, and they're really just good. They're really, really good at watching YouTube videos. But they're not so good at constructing sentences.
Hey, who's going to need to construct sentences on a keyboard when you've got Siri to do it for you?
Oh man, there it is, man. There it is.
Play devil's advocate there.
All right, listen.
I'm sorry, Dave. I just can't do that.
Yeah, thank you. Open the pod bay doors, Hal. Hal, open the pod bay doors.
All right,
Sorry, Dave.
listen, we need to start bringing this thing in for a landing. David, give us an update on just this past fall, the whole Soul Shift tour, and where you guys are with that now, and what do you see in the future?
Boy, it's been really exciting. Thanks so much for having interviewed Steve and I twice. You guys did it here on the Techology Show, and then also down in North Carolina when we were down there to do an event in your area. Great to have conversed with you guys about it. I think a lot of your listeners and watchers know about Soul Shift already. What's been happening has been really cool to see it implemented in churches like Heath was talking about in his church, where it's become a little less of a, hey, there's a book I read, and more of a way of thinking differently about spiritual formation. So the stories we're hearing about that have been incredibly encouraging. A kit came out that has a ton of stuff in it to support churches doing their own Soul Shift emphasis and embedding it in their spiritual formation journey as a church, or in a lot of churches just creating a spiritual formation journey for the first time. As was said earlier, we don't really do that much in the church, ironically. That's been cool. There's been hundreds of churches now that have picked that up and have started to implement it. And so now we're sort of in phase 2 with the Soul Shift thing of just supporting people relationally, trying to connect with them. The OurSoulShift.com website has taken off with some resources put on there. And then, as I mentioned a bit ago, we're now experimenting with sort of phase 3 type stuff, including an online assessment that we want to go live with soon. That's going to be beta with our church. And then the iHabit app that we hope to be rolling out to people next fall. So we're trying to sort of make sure that we're giving as much to people as we can from our church. And one of the things we're right now doing is, in our own church, we don't want to abandon Soul Shift and what its effect on our church. And one of the ways we're doing that is we're going through just one shift in January and February. We're looking at just the slave to child shift. Spiritually, it was very important for people in our church, full of a bunch of people slaving away for Jesus, and have forgotten perhaps that they're his child and their son or daughters of God. And so we're trying to emphasize that. Charles Bresley wrote a little study guide all our small group Sunday school classes are going to go through. And what's cool is those have come out now on every shift. And so other churches are going to be grabbing that too, although ours is the first. So we're continuing to kind of try to be on the forefront of embedding this in the body life of our church as a little bit of a lab for other churches.
Sure. Has there been any progress made on literature for kids' Sunday school classes and youth Sunday school classes?
Yes, that's actually already being developed with Wesleyan Publishing House and Jill Mazellan, and actually a former intern from our church, G.D. McClanahan, who's now in New Jersey at Princeton. The two of them collaborated and took what we did, and they're updating it. And Jill's kind of the primary editor on it, and that's I don't have a press date on that, a release date.
Okay.
It's in development.
All right.
Same with the youth program, by the way. There's a whole youth program coming out related to that. It's a lot bigger than we expected it to be, because Matt Beck, our youth pastor, and Matt DePrez, who I mentioned earlier, they're collaborating together to do it, a Soul Shift program for youth that's a little bit more developed.
Now, David, how has it helped to literally have like you said, a built-in beta testing core group there at your church that the people at College Wesleyan can kind of go through some of this stuff before it's really released to the broader public? And I'm sure that has had a tremendous impact on the spiritual growth in your church. Talk just a little bit about that quickly.
Well, we have to be a little protective because we're not a lab. we're an actual church. So we never want our church, we never want to have the tail wag the dog. We want to do only things that our church needs, with the assumption and hope that perhaps other people might need it. So for instance, these follow-up Bible studies, we needed them. So we just did them for ourselves. If nobody ever published them or used them, it would be worth doing. But it just so happens that other people are saying they want it now too. So that's sort of a rule of thumb for us. As far as the impact on lives, what's great is we're seeing it go more viral and continuing to unleash. I mean, I was in my office here with Sia, who has joined our church a couple years ago. She's an African-American woman who runs the local St. Martin's Community Center. And she now has been invited to go into local shelters for women who either don't have a home or from battered homes and so forth. And she's now doing soul shift with all of them and going through all that there. So it's neat to see it sort of spread outside of the walls of the church. Those people don't know who I am. They don't know Steve. They might not darken the door of the church, but they're using it that way because it's just basic spiritual formation stuff.
Yeah. Well, you guys have produced a wonderful tool for the church, and it gets back to this axe I've been grinding for a long time. We have a hard time in creating these dashboard indicators for spiritual formation, and this is what this book does, and it does it effectively. I know there are many of us out here who are really waiting, excited about curriculum for children and for our youth, and I know Matthew's just kind of waiting because he wants to take the whole church through it. Right. So the sermon series, and then you leave the sermon and you go right to the Sunday school class and where this is discussed. And so I can't speak for the whole denomination, but we can speak for one local church that is rooting for those that are working on that curriculum.
That's right.
Yes.
Hey, giveaway.
Yep.
Let's make this happen, okay? All right, guys. Here it is, happening live right now. Random number generator. Here we go. Austin Rampy.
Austin Rampy.
All right. Well, Austin, this is what you need to do. You need to get us your address. We will get that on to Priscilla Hammond. She's the secretary, administrative assistant for Dr. Joanne Lyon, and they will mail that book out to you.
I got his address. So, Austin, you're good to go. Your book will be in the mail.
All right. We'll get that out to Priscilla today. David, thanks so much, man, for taking time out and being with us today.
It's so great to be with you guys. Have a great Christmas.
You too. I want to let you know that for our listeners, we are off next week. So have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we're going to join you 2 weeks from today. And Heath, who's going to be the guy, man?
Mark Batterson's going to be here with us talking about The Circle Maker, his new book. And very excited. I'm according to my Kindle, I'm about 10% into the book, and it is really good so far. And we're just so blessed to have him on the show with us January the 4th.
And then January the 12th, Ken Meyer.
Who wrote the book about church communications, really, and a great book for anybody in any kind of communications called Less Clutter, Less Noise. So she does conferences on this and goes around teaching. This is fantastic. So I would encourage you to read that book if you haven't. I have a copy that's a very easy read, very fun book to read, and I look forward to
And that's going to be
a Thursday. Yeah.
That's going to be a Thursday podcast at 1 p.m. She has a conflict on Wednesday. We do as well because we have our pastors gathering. So that's Thursday, 1 o'clock. Get it on your calendar. January the 18th, Chad McCollum will be with us. He's a church planter in the West Michigan district. I've gotten to know Chad and excited about talking to him about church planting. And hopefully, if you're a church planter out there, join us in the chat room that day, and we'll have a great time together. All right, if you want to do further research on anything we've discussed today, you can find all the links to the stories we've covered at our website, thetechnologyshow.com. If you want to contact us, send your emails to thetechnologyshow@gmail.com, or leave us a voicemail by calling us at 3049-TEOLOGY. That's 304-986-5649. Leave us a message. We may even play your comments on the air. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Adios.
Tim Tebow.
Nice.